Hi, all, and welcome. I am Dr. Rachel Kowert, and I have the wonderful honor today of hosting the 2020 Dr. Mark Award presented by Take This. But before we get into the award itself and our discussion of mental health and games, I'd like to first introduce these two very lovely people that I am joined with today, Amanda Farough and Dr. Mark Kline. Amanda is a games journalist, the co-host of the Virtual Economy podcast, and half of F Squared. Hi, Amanda.
Hello.
And Dr. Mark Kline is the namesake of the Dr. Mark Award. Dr. Kline is the executive director of the Human Relations Service, a nonprofit mental health agency serving the towns of Wesley, Weston, and Wayland, Massachusetts, where he has served for 31 years. HRS is one of the nation's oldest outpatient mental health clinics, founded in 1948 by Eric Lindman. Dr. Kline and his leadership team oversee all aspects of the agency's operations and work closely with the school and community leaders in all three towns. Dr. Kline and his wife live in the Metro West suburban area of Boston and are proud parents of three young adults. At least one, I am told, is a video gamer. Dr. Kline's interest in gaming and mental health arose from his work with his children and families at what he says was the dawn of the internet, and has been involved with playing games with his clients, as well as exploring some games more in depth on his own. He wrote about these experiences for The Escapist and later provided a mental health advice column there called Ask Dr. Mark. Dr. Kline co-founded Take This in 2013 with the hope of increasing mental health awareness and education within the video gaming community. And as Take This's first clinical director, he was involved in the creation of the AFK room at PAX events and provided early content for the Take This website. As his leadership responsibilities at HRS grew, Dr. Kline had to step back from Take This, but remains a strong supporter of our mission and our work. Thank you both very much for being here, and we're going to start the evening today with a few words from Dr. Mark.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm truly honored to be here and incredibly proud of the terrific work going on at Take This. When Take This was founded in 2013, our idea was, as you say, to provide high quality mental health education and resources to the video game community. As a clinical psychologist, I could see both the need and the interest, but one component was missing. Mental health professionals as a group had little understanding of video game culture and of gaming, and there was a tendency to think of it only as addictive behavior, or at very least, just as maladaptive escapism. And no doubt, as we can all acknowledge, those exist in the gaming community. But as I learned more about it, I discovered that there was so much more. Games were worlds where people could live happily and safely, where connections developed and relationships grew. The gaming community was warm, supportive, intelligent, curious, and burgeoning. We just needed to stop painting all gamers and gaming activity with one narrow brush. As soon as that became clear, the floodgates opened. Gamers wanted to learn about mental health and how to get assistance for problems that might have no relation to their gaming activity. We saw this in panels and workshops over many PAX and other conventions. There's also been an upsurge in professional interest in mental health and gaming, as indicated by the number of clinicians that Take This, but also by the several dissertation committees I have served on at local professional schools. So the central insight of Take This in its early days is this: gamers want to learn about mental health as long as we don't start by calling gaming a mental disorder. It seems kind of simple, but it still trips up a lot of people, so I thought I would restate it. It's amazing to me that in the past several years, this dialogue within the gaming community has intensified. It truly blows my mind that developers are actually creating games that are fun to play and have mental health themes baked in. Note those two components, fun to play and baked in. Years ago, there were many people trying to gamify mental health treatment applications, but many weren't any fun to play at all. And when you make a treatment application, you only reach those people who identify as patients and want treatment, which is still only a segment of the population. So I'm truly excited about all three of these nominees and the fine work they have done.
Thank you, Dr. Mark. And yes, all three are definitely fun to play. We have a good group of games to talk about today. As I mentioned, we're here for the Dr. Mark Award in Excellence in Mental Health, and this is awarded to the video game studio, developer, or other product entity person best exhibiting excellence in advancing ideas related to mental health treatment and or acceptance through video games. There has been one previous winner of the Dr. Mark Award, and that went to Stardew Valley in 2017. So before we get to the nominees, I want to open it up a little more broadly, and I want to throw this question to you, Amanda. Why do you think this award is so important? What is so important about highlighting games that represent mental health well?
Well, one of the things that I think is the most important is we talk about representation in games for a number of reasons, right? Not the least of which is to define our social and cultural norms, the values of our time, like right here, right now. And I love the fact that this award exists because it's more recognition for games that are handling sensitive and creatively gameplay and narrative. And for me specifically, I'm involved in the media that I'm actively consuming. So, video games. It makes me my bipolar if I need it. And to me, as a journalist, to use my voice to write about my experiences. And I found that by sharing those experiences, I can open the gates wide for people who are struggling with their mental health as well. By highlighting games that represent mental health well, we're opening those doors for greater understanding of what those mental illnesses actually feel like, what it feels like in your body when you're going through these various bits and pieces of these games. The mechanics help you feel this way, and what they mean to those of us who have to live with a mental illness.
That's a really great point. It's one thing to just talk about it, but it's another thing. Games give us that ability to interact with it, to engage with it, to feel it, to be vicariously experiencing it. Do you have
Exactly.
anything
The
to add, Dr. Moore?
interactivity.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that if a game creates a feeling state that's sort of like what someone else feels, and it improves people's ability to empathize with with a broad range of others who are suffering and struggling, then our whole society is improved because of that. We need more understanding. We need more empathy. We need more of experiences that allow us to get into other people's shoes and understand what it's like for other people. So even if we're not suffering from the disorder that a game represents accurately, we can develop that capacity to empathize, which makes us better friends, relatives, and society mates.
Absolutely. And research has found that mass media is one of the most common sources of information about mental illness. And research has also found that exposure to negative media portrayals of mental illness are linked to exactly what you're talking about: stereotype perceptions of the mentally ill, a reduction of help seeking behavior for people who are struggling. And as we all know, video games are the biggest form of mass media we have now. So it's really important that we also, as a gaming community, step up to the plate and don't rely on stereotyped and caricatured and inaccurate portrayals of mental health.
With all the cool stuff games do, there's no reason they can't do this great, right?
It's true.
And they do it great. Do now. Yeah. And also,
Exactly.
I will say I love Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley, the original recipient of the Dr. Mark Award, is an excellent example, as are the three nominees that we are here to talk about today. So let me just briefly go over the criteria to be nominated for this award. The eligible recipients had to exhibit the following four attributes. The first is deal with one or more real-world aspect of mental health. They needed to exhibit hopeful, healing attitudes towards mental health issues, foster wider acceptance and understanding of mental illness, and encourage others to positively address mental health issues. So nominations were made by the community, and winners were selected by a committee of game developers, clinicians, community managers, ambassadors, Take the Streaming ambassadors, and journalists, including Amanda and also Tim Hickson, who was in the previous panel. He was also on the committee. About 10 different games were nominated, but for the sake of time, we're just going to talk about the top 3 finalists, which were Greece, Sea of Solitude, and Celeste. I first want to mention that all 3 of these games are absolutely visually stunning. They all have very different artistic styles, but when I was starting to play these games, the first thing I noticed, they're all just incredibly beautiful. I'm sure you
True.
all agree. I see nods. Yeah, just so beautiful. So let's start talking. Let's talk about Greece. I'm going to give a little TLDR and then we'll open up the discussion. So if you're not familiar with this game, it is a platform adventure game by Spanish indie developer Nomada Studio and published by Devolver Digital. And the little blurb is the game follows a girl named Greece who wakes up in the palm of a crumbling statue of a woman. She attempts to sing out, but quickly becomes choked up, and the statue's hands crumble, dropping her to a colorless earth below. After landing, the girl continues walking forward and discovers a number of strange structures that seem to be powered by mysterious points of light. The girl can collect these lights and gain new abilities, such as turning into a block of stone or creating new pathways made out of constellations. I thought that this game was very striking in the fact that there's no dialogue and it tells its entire story through music and color, which is really unique. And what did you two think? What did you think of the game, Amanda?
So I love this game. Greece is a game that holds a really special place in my heart. It's so beautiful that it creates this ache in your heart. And my experience with Greece is really second only to my experience with, I don't know if you all have played that game studio's Journey, but
Yes, that's what it reminded me of.
that's
Yes.
exactly what this reminded me of because it's that wordless narrative, the exploration of a world that you don't really understand, but it really moves you. It made me gasp with surprise, and it hurt enough to make me cry, and the mechanics can sometimes be so gut-wrenching. But the thing that I love most about this game is the music. The music and the art. The music takes people to these sweeping highs where you feel light and airy and everything is so beautiful for a moment, and then it can take you to these crushing lows. And this luscious handcrafted style that just wraps the whole package up with a bow. But in terms of the experience itself, the exploration of despair is probably one of the most accurate that I've encountered in a game. You know, the loneliness is so palpable when you're wandering around these gorgeous landscapes, but you're alone a lot of the time. You can't speak, you can't do anything other than go forward. And it's that thread of hope that's woven throughout the narrative that kept me moving, kept me chasing those little pockets of light, right? All the way to the end. I wanted Greece to have a voice again. I wanted her to sing. I wanted her to be able to find her happiness, to fully process her grief and her sorrow. And I love most that this is a story that will never really have answers. It's supposed to be universal. It's supposed to be oh, I feel this. Like, I feel this so deeply. And it's entirely open to interpretation. It's supposed to be for everyone who feels like their voice has been silenced through grief and through loss.
Wow, Amanda, that was just so evocative and rich and beautiful. I feel like anything I could say about the game would pale by comparison. I think it's just wonderful that the game uh, created such strong feelings and emotions for you. And people all over are having to deal with loneliness, with grief,
Mhm.
especially in this time of COVID 19, where many of us don't get too far out of our house. So to have a game that pulls for those emotions and allows you to experience them, it really it can be very cathartic and almost therapeutic to have those emotions echoed in such a powerful and, as I say, evocative way.
I think Greece is definitely a therapeutic experience. I love that you're always moving
Yes.
upward, you're always moving forward. And it really kind of does have the imagery and evokes the 5 stages of grief, where at the end you're getting to the point of acceptance. And I love there's no game over screen, which means you can always try again, which is good for me because
Yes.
I'm not that great at games, even though I love them. Um, Yeah, I really love this game. And that's funny that you mentioned Journey, because that's exactly the game that it evoked for me when I first saw it.
And Journey is one of my very favorite games. It genuinely is. So having this stand up next to Journey is enormous.
Mhm. And do you think that the lack of dialogue is part of the reason that this game does seem to be such a universal experience for people who play it?
I know it is for me. I felt like throughout the game when I was journeying with Greece through her various stages of grief, you know, if she had been talking, it would have been her, right? It would have been Greece's journey, not our journey, not my shared journey with her. And it was the same thing in Journey, right? If anyone had spoken really, not just um their beautiful scarf people language. It wouldn't have been as profound because it wouldn't have been our journey. It would have just been I'm controlling this avatar through this avatar's journey.
Right,
So that's
right.
I think that that's a piece that really spoke to me.
Yeah.
So you
And the
give the
music too.
character its voice, and its mentalization comes from you. So becomes
Hmm.
very personal. Wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful game. Okay, number two, Sea of Solitude, which we were talking to Connie earlier panel. Sea of Solitude is an adventure video game developed by German studio Jomi Games and published by Electronic Arts. TLDR, the player controls a young woman named Kay who suffers from strong feelings of loneliness, that her inner feelings of hopelessness, anger, and worthlessness turn to the outside and she becomes a monster. This story, I just I love this game. It's so beautiful. Just the manifestation of the dark and the light. I'll give it to you guys first. Amanda.
This was another big one for me. I played this last year when I was going through some stuff personally, and it was a painful experience. It hurt. Like every time I picked up that controller and I was guiding Kay around, I was like, man, this game, it really does cut. Like it hurts to play. Because every time I thought that I could take a breath and look around at the scenery around me, the rain would come in, right? And I'd need to keep Kay moving. And that monster below, the one that like screams profanities at you, the scary tyrant of a creature, was just this constant source of anxiety, right? It was this ever-present thing that's gnawing at the back of my head when I'm guiding Kay around wherever she ends up. It was just like, oh, I really definitely feel this anxiety and these terrifying battles and this angry language, and I felt so raw and exposed. But the further I got into the story, the more I felt like I understood Kay and why she was feeling like she was feeling, because those struggles are so familiar, right? And they're supposed to be a reflection of Connie's feelings of overwhelm. And I felt so witnessed, like so seen as a result of Connie taking her experience and developing a game that would help people to better understand this is what it's like to live with overwhelm, to live with depression and fear and regret. And it was like Connie and her team really saw my struggles as a mom. Like I have so like I'm sure, Rachel, that you have gone through that yourself where it's
Preach.
like, oh,
Yeah.
mom guilt is
Yeah.
a real thing.
Yeah.
And parent guilt in general, not to gender this, but
Yeah.
parental guilt in general is like it is this thing that is it feels like the weight of the world is on your shoulders and you feel like this horrible ragged monster in all the worst ways at all the worst times even though you're doing your best. So it's like she really saw me and built a game for me to cope with those anxieties about the world around me. Sea of Solitude helped me to unmask my own demons. And it reminded me that along with the shadows, the ones that I battle regularly as somebody who has to deal with bipolar every single day, I don't get a day off from that, unfortunately. But even among those battles, there's always light. And all I have to do is go get on my boat and go find it again.
Mhm.
Mm.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's so
Beautiful.
inspirational, Amanda, that these games, you know, affect you so deeply. I used the word evocative before, but I see you as sort of a representative of the gamer community who play these games, and which is everybody now, by the way. Everybody plays video games,
True.
but you're this incredibly articulate representative of that community, and you can describe how these games make you feel, how they affect you, how they help you, how they mirror you and reflect you. And to me, it's incredibly inspiring. I would hope it would be inspiring for game developers, but just as a psychologist, for me, it's very inspiring how much meaning and how much mirroring you find in these beautiful games.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
I think Sea of Solitude is a visceral experience, truly. There's a quote from the Daily
It is.
Star, which I want to share, which I think sums it up really well. Quote, "We can't think of any other game that casts you as a young girl who encounters monsters she doesn't understand, that insult her, talk down to her, fill her with shame and self-doubt. We can't think of any other games that nail the idea of lethargy and horror around you, the only respite coming from one known safe space where color just about manages to penetrate the fugue. We can't think of
Mm.
any other games that gently urge you to push through the blackness, but make you question yourself every step of the way. Truly, this game gets what it's like to be depressed."
Mm.
Like you
Absolutely.
said, the monster's always lurking. I mean, what
Always
better
there.
way to express it? Yeah, always there.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Anyway, this is cathartic for me. Last but not least, let's talk
I'm
about
trying not to
Celeste.
cry.
You're doing a great job. Um, Celeste is a platforming video game by Canadian video game developers Matt Thorson and Noel Berry, with art by the Brazilian studio Mini Boss. The game was originally created as a prototype in 4 days during a game jam and later expanded into a full release. The TLDR is Celeste is a platform game in which players control a girl named Madeline as she makes her way up a mountain while avoiding various deadly obstacles. She has an alter ego, which is her anxiety, called Badeline, and she has to battle Badeline through her ascent up the mountain. Um, for me, Celeste, the most interesting part of the game is the realization that Madeline isn't a monster, but a part of Madeline that is necessary for her to overcome the mountain. And it conveys those darker parts of ourselves, the thoughts, the feelings that we're haunted by, that serve a protective purpose in the beginning, but over time can become harmful or distressing. I found this game to be very therapeutic. Also, what did you think about it, Amanda?
So Celeste was really challenging for me because it's not my kind of game. The Massacre games are really challenging for me. They require a lot of time, a lot of investment in terms of the mechanics. It's not that I'm a bad gamer. I'm not. I actually managed to get fairly far in the game before, I remembered, oh yeah, this is like Super Meat Boy and probably isn't for me in
Yeah.
terms of the mechanics. But Celeste does something completely different than what I've found in other Massacre games. It makes you feel incredible, not just like a, yeah, I'm so smart, but you actually feel this sense of relief when you're able to make it through a particularly difficult piece of a level. And especially when you finally make your way through the chapter of the story, because the story is so heartbreaking and it's this mirror for anxiety. But for me, the real lesson in Celeste was in the self care of walking away and knowing that, you know what, that's okay too.
Well, the
Dr.
game
Mark?
seems to have a component of, you know, a part of oneself being split off from the rest of oneself. And there's this struggle to achieve some kind of integration. And there's the sort of assumption that the bad part of yourself just has to be destroyed, right? Or beaten in order to win the challenge. But the reality
Hmm.
is that's not how you win when you have a part of yourself that isn't connected to the rest of yourself, which by the way is
Hmm.
not indicative of a specific mental disorder, but is part of a lot of people's psychology, right?
Hmm.
So in the game, there is this challenge to find a way to confront this part of the self that's been split off and to try to figure out a way to achieve some sort of integration. And to me, that's really quite sophisticated and quite profound. And it really impressed me.
Yeah, and a lot of people, when we talk about Celeste, they immediately think of the scene with the feather. So if
Mm.
you're not familiar with the game, there's a scene where Madeline and her friend Theo are on a gondola, and the gondola stops halfway up, and Madeline has a panic attack, and Theo has her visualize her anxiety as a floating feather. And with the controls in the game, you try to keep the feather in a box, and it's meant to like regulate your breathing, which is a pretty incredible visualization to have. Like when you think about it in a video game about this is how you calm down. And I find that with Celeste and Sea of Solitude and Grease, I think the reason these three became finalists, not only because they're fantastic games, but because they really did a job of integrating mental health into the narrative and the mechanics of the game.
Yes,
It wasn't an
absolutely.
afterthought. So, yeah. Right. Are we ready for the to announce the winner? This is like
Oh,
what everyone is here
yes.
for. I would
Lay it
like to
on me.
So,
say all three games are wonderful, and I wish we could split it into three because all three games are absolutely deserving. Um, so I'm going to give the honor to Dr. Mark, the namesake of the award, to announce the winner of the 2020 Dr. Mark Award.
I have to say that I'm just incredibly, tickled to have an award named after me and actually be able to bestow it on somebody. It's really wonderful. What a great honor. Um, so this year, the Dr. Mark Award will go to the game Celeste. A bit about Celeste. So I don't think we need to say more, except that this theme of trying to integrate oneself, how to collect the important parts of ourselves into a coherent whole and have a healthy self, and what the consequences of not being able to do it are, is just so essential to who we are. It's an essential challenge, and it's really incredible that a game could somehow portray that. I know many, many people who are struggling with that challenge feel very much heard and represented by Celeste. I want to thank Matt Makes Games, which is what they call themselves, but you had their real names, Rachel. Maybe you should say their real names.
Oh, let me scroll back down
Okay, while you're doing,
one
I want to thank them for their fine effort. Uh, And I also want to thank the other nominees. You've helped countless people by addressing mental health in your work. It's a fabulous evolution from where things were, but we're still just beginning. Mental health issues are fundamental to the human condition, and they, of course, as we all three of us know, proliferate in times of stress, crisis, and isolation. So, what do we have? We are here in a time of stress, crisis, and isolation. So, we turn to you to say, help us play through.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I
Um,
love that.
that's beautiful. Yeah. Their full names are Matt Thorson and Noel Berry.
Thanks, Matt and Noel.
Yes.
And they make up extremely okay games.
That's why we have the
Good.
games journalist on the panel because she knows that kind of information. And thank you all for being here to talk about this. I mean, I think we mentioned this in the beginning, but the images and the messages in the world around us, they reflect how we think and they produce the way that we think. And it's so wonderful
Yes.
to see so many games being developed with this idea of I feel seen, I feel heard, things are hopeful. Um, I think Amanda summed it up really well in her description of these three games that we can create this media that is so evocative in a positive way and in a
Yes.
hopeful and accurate way.
Yep. Well said.
This has been really beautiful. I'm going to try not to cry, but I'm not going to succeed.
Well,
No, don't cry.
it's been an honor and a pleasure, and I couldn't ask to be on a panel with two more articulate, thoughtful people when it comes to mental health. And that 7 years ago we started something that would bring the three of us together here in 2020. I really feel quite inspired by it.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Mark. That I also
Thank
feel
you
very
so much.
inspired by your company and by seeing these changes in the game industry and by seeing you all here watching this stream. Who would have thought that 20 years ago we would have a stream celebrating mental health and games,
I certainly didn't see it coming.
right? but it's wonderful.
But this has
And we have a
been
wonderful.
really inspirational, and each of these games is so incredible in its own way. And even if one or more of these games didn't resonate with you, like Celeste didn't resonate with me, it doesn't devalue the game itself. It doesn't devalue the experience. You know, these games are all important for their contribution to this industry in a variety of different ways. And I'm just so grateful that we were able to talk about each of them with yeah, I'm just so grateful that we got to talk about each of them because like especially Sea of Solitude and Greece, they mean so much to me. So this has been really great. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thanks, guys. So now we're going to go to the profiles of hope.